being able to put it into practice with what we're working on in this class. So this is great.
Right. Cool. All right, other questions and comments before we're going to do what's called a kind of a pre-instructional strategy. It's a pre-instructional strategy you'll learn about in the next module. But before you go directly into instruction, sometimes you might want to engage in what they call a pre-instructional strategy. And we like to walk the walk and talk the talk. So with that, if there are no more discussion, I'm going to let Trish take over, and then she's going to ask you to do some things and have more discussion. So I think she's going to take over control here. And do I need to stop sharing in order for you to let me stop sharing? And now maybe you can share.
Okay, now I unmuted too. So can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. I was like, okay, and now I can't hear anybody either. All right, so when we were reading through the Mager test, if you guys if you did already, you'll see that he has criteria for when we write objectives, and there's many different criteria depending on, you know, whose tenant you follow. But Mager outlines it as performance, condition, and criterion. So performance is, what do you want your learners to be able to do? The condition is, under what conditions are they going to do it? And then the criterion is like, what is their level of competence? So what I did is I came up with different examples of objectives or not objectives. So what I wanted to do is just go through each of these and have some discussion on whether or not we think that these are objectives, or if these are not actual objectives, and if they're not, why. Okay, so here's the first one, is understand the difference between stocks and bonds. So would somebody like to take that one on and define this as either objective or not objective?
It's not an objective.
Okay, and why not?
It's not very specific. Like understand, it's like there's no, yeah.
How will you
Exactly.
measure understanding?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. Understand is not something that you can measure at all.
And I've been guilty of using that, so this book has been really good.
Yeah, a lot of, I mean, I've taken classes where I've had that too. So, and the cool thing is, as we go through these courses in this ID program, this becomes like part of us, and we kind of critique everything else that we see, whether we're taking a class or giving a class, by the measure that we're taught. So we could take this one a little bit further. Oh, go on, I'm sorry.
And I think you see that type of language, my experience anyway, I see that type of language used a lot more in corporate versus education.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure.
This is Nanette Tessier. I teach this piece in a new hire orientation where I work, teaching people about bonds, what they look like, and what the differences are between bonds and sellers. So this is home to me.
I kind of actually did go through everybody's introduction posts at the beginning of the course when we started. And so I did actually kind of incorporate a lot of what you guys are doing, your professions, into this little presentation here. So I'm glad you picked up on that. Personalizing learning, right? Okay, so how about this next one? Compare and contrast the difference between stocks and bonds. It's a
No.
better. Is it an objective?
No.
And what is missing?
The performance and conditions, really. It doesn't tell you how you're going to compare or contrast the difference. It's very
Right.
open-ended. Yeah.
Yep, very good. Anybody else have anything to add to that? No? Okay. And how about this? Tightening it up a bit. Students will compare and contrast stocks and bonds using the provided T-chart and rubric. Objective or not?
I'm going to go out there and say yes.
Thank you, Patrick. So, yep, this one actually does count. Now, like I said at the beginning, there's different interpretations of what all needs to be included in objectives. Mager, like I said, has the performance, condition, and criterion. The one that I was originally taught was ABCD, so audience, behavior, condition, and demonstration. So here we got audience as your students. The behavior, they'll compare and contrast stocks and bonds. And the condition, excuse me, is using the provided T-chart and rubric. So Mager, he leaves out the whole thing about saying that you don't need to define the audience. Like, we need to define the audience, obviously, when we do our front end analysis, because we need to know who we're teaching. But he says that it's not so critical that you spell that out in the objectives. So like in our course objectives, like in the introduction section of each of our modules, you know, that's an excellent resource to look back at what objectives look like, because Nicole has them listed for H1. So sometimes they'll just say, they'll have the 2 terminal objectives, and then it'll list all the enabling objectives. It's inferred that the students will blah, 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 and blah, 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 1, 2, and 3 objectives. So the actual word students is not always a component that needs to be included in there. But it's the way that I was taught, so that's the way that I think when I do it. Here's another one. Workers will demonstrate how to sort grade A and grade B fruits in the field. What do you guys think about this one?
No.
Nope.
Okay. And
It needs a condition.
Well, you need some criteria for how you're going to determine what is A and B.
okay. So what if A is, they've already learned what A is and what B is and they're in the field. This is one of those fuzzy ones, I think.
Yeah.
I think I would go far enough to say that in the field would be the condition, because that's specific enough to me to say that they're actually going to be in a field as opposed to doing this through CBT. Right?
Right.
So they're going to have to actually go somewhere, it sounds like to me, and actually sort these things, these fruits.
And be demonstrating them.
Right, and demonstrating how to sort them, which means knowledge.
Would it be better if it said, like, given the list of, I don't know, or whatever it is that they are provided with to determine the grade A and grade B, like to make it more specific? You know, given this.
Yeah, I think I'm sorry. I think
No,
the underlying assumption that we're making here is that they've already been educated on what is considered grade A and what is considered grade B. And now they're at the point where they're going to demonstrate that.
And that is a great point, Patrick, because when we start talking about, you already mentioned Bloom's taxonomy, and that you two just had a perfect conversation about two similar objectives at different levels. So if I'm going to just list what the difference between grade A and grade B, or explain the difference, or that level is lower level than the actual demonstration level on Bloom. So demonstration is actually applying, right? At the very minimum, that's at least applying. It's actually differentiating, right, as well. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about Bloom's, you know, this might have the bigger overall arching objective might have several objectives that scaffold. So maybe the one previous to this was, you know, workers will identify the difference between grade A and grade B or something like that, you know, or define the difference or whatever it happens to be. And then now they're actually demonstrating. So I think that was an excellent conversation you guys just brought up. Really good points. I'm trying to stay out of this, sorry.
No, that's good. Because, yep. Anybody else want to add to this? All right. See, I've kind of built these in to kind of try to pull these conversations out, so I appreciate that. Students will use a computer simulation that shows how to change an oil filter.
This is an instructor objective.
Very good. Yeah. It's more of a description of how we're going to, what we're going to do with them. So, yep, absolutely. The objectives of this course is to decrease production errors.
No.
I agree. And why? Or why not?
I'd say that's just far too broad to.
Yep.
Right.
This is more what your SME or whoever is asking you to write the course is going to come up to you and say, oh, you know, we're having too many production errors and we need a course to.
Uh-oh, got cut off.
Trish, you broke up.
Oh no.
Okay, start over.
Okay. My internet connection is unstable, it says. So one of my kids must have woke up and hopped on. They're hogging the internet now. All right, so
This to me reads more like the aim statement.
Yeah, huh? Good job.
yep. And from after this, now you're like, okay, so now what? Now how do we move forward? And then we start going into our analysis.
Yep, this is what I am always trying to get people to understand. And I didn't, Trish, you did this on you did such a great job on this because you did this on your own. This is a business objective. The objective of this course from a business perspective is to get people to reduce production errors. Now, okay, why the production errors? So now you got to do an analysis, right? So this is too broad.
Yep. Using the welding simulator, create a weld that will maintain stability up to 5,000 pounds of pressure. Is this an objective?
I think so.
I think so.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
Very good. Yep. So they're going to be using the welding simulator. So that's their condition. Their criterion is that it's going to maintain the stability of up to 5,000 pounds of pressure. And the performance is using that simulator to create that weld. So yes, that would be an objective.
I want to see that simulator though. That sounds pretty cool.
I've actually seen that simulator, like not in person, but I've saw it like on the news. Our local technical college has one. So
Wow.
yeah. Create a fused glass art piece. This is for my art majors in the class here. There are a couple of them in this class.
There's no condition, so no.
Exactly. Okay, so how big does this fused glass art piece need to be? How many pieces of glass are we allowed to use? Blah, blah, blah. It's very ambiguous here. Students will demonstrate how to safely transfer a patient from their bed to a wheelchair using a Hoyer lift.
That looks pretty good.
Yes.
I would think so too.
Yep, yep. Tells about what they need to do. They're going to safely transfer the patient and they're going to be using the Hoyer lift. Upon completion of this module, students should know how to use both Canvas and Blackboard.
No.
Not quite.
Right, and what is missing?
Too
What is
too
wrong with
broad.
it?
How are you going to measure knowing how?
Yep, exactly. How would you rephrase it? or roughly rephrase it. It doesn't have to be perfect.
I might have specific, be able to post an assignment or.
Yep. Yep. Excellent. Anybody else want to add to that? Okay. Customer service workers will demonstrate proper questioning techniques to determine the urgency of help desk calls. What do you guys think of this one?
No. It's not defined what determines urgency. How do they demonstrate? Yeah, it's too vague.
Okay. Yep. Exactly. How will they demonstrate that? Are they going to be taking a quiz? Are they going to be fielding sample calls and having somebody review their work or listen in on the line? Or exactly how are they going to demonstrate that?
Megar would say it's fuzzy, I think.
It is fuzzy. Yep. Yep. And then another thing besides the fuzzy, yep, that's good, is Nicole wanted me to kind of touch on like false conditions. We need to be careful when we're writing our objectives that we don't have false conditions. And I think I had one in here, but now I don't remember which one it is. Well, this could be used as one. Upon completion of the module. So a false condition could be something like, provided with 6 weeks of training, the students will be able to do X, Y, and Z. And in the book, Megar talked about, well, what happens if you have an instructor that can make that happen in 4 weeks of training? So does that mean that the student is not meeting the condition? Another example of a false condition would be like, according to section 32.6 in the government statute 2060, blah, 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 blah. It's like the student must readily be able to have access to the condition to be able to have it count actually. It can't be something just like obscure that's like, oh, well, we have to meet this criteria because this is what the regulation is. Well, the student darn well better have been taught and have access to what that regulation is. Otherwise, you can't expect them to be able to comply with that.
Mm.
All right, anything else that you guys want to add on this, or?
I think another good example of false condition is after reading the PowerPoint, blah, 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 blah,
Mm-hmm.
The condition is supposed to be replicating under what conditions would the learner have to literally be expected to perform within when they're actually doing the job. So on the job, if you have to do calculations, are you going to be using a calculator, a software tool, blah, blah, whatever? I mean, when you're actually creating the performance, doing the performance, you're teaching online, what are the conditions? You need, given a headset, whatever it happens to be, we're doing it right now. Then we're all in different conditions right now. But if there's an expectation of it to perform, to meet this performance, are there conditions in which you regularly perform under? And if so, what are they? And are we going to replicate those in our learning environment?
Right.
So looking at that last one, to make it more an objective, just getting more specific perhaps in a typical call or in a real life call, students will be able to triage to 3 levels or something like that, or
yeah, I mean, yeah, given
right.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yep. And you can even add a criterion like in healthcare, like in radiology, when we were in school, we had to do so many competencies. We had to, practice doing the exams under observation by a technologist until we felt comfortable doing it. And then we'd have to actually comp out, as we called it. So there was a criterion, a checklist of everything that had to be included to successfully comp out on the test or on the exam. And we'd have to do so many of those competencies to be eligible to take our board examination to get our license. So that you can also add in there a number of times where it has to be completed successfully as well. So they would have to 10 times successfully demonstrate the proper triaging of these phone calls.
Can I jump in on that, piggyback on that?
Yep.
Because I think that was an awesome example of how to take a situation where you're, okay, more often than not, people will instead state the objective as nursing students will pass the test. That is never an objective. What you just did, Trish, was you specifically mentioned like one part of what the competency, the actual competency is that so they have to do it 10 times correctly in order to pass a specific task or whatever it is, knowledge, piece of knowledge. That's the actual objective, not to pass the test. Now, the business, of course, goal is that you pass the test, but that's not, passing a test is not the objective. Even if that is truly in your heart as a teacher, what you want your students to do, it's not what students are learning. It's what is on the test, right?
Yep.
So don't fall into that trap. It happens every semester. Somebody's like, oh, well, they got to pass this test. Well, they do, but what is on the test is what's important. That's the content. That's the objectives. That's what you really want them to know.
You don't want your paramedic that shows up at your doorstep to have known how to pass the test, but not know how to save your life.
That's awesome. I'm muting myself again.
I have a question. This is Katie. How granular do the conditions need to be? Like, for example, like saying, given the fact that they have to have a stable internet connection, like given a stable internet connection, the student, like if it's an online course, is that too detailed?
I think that is too detailed, because I think that obviously they have to have a stable internet connection to think that they're going to be able to take an online course. That's also a lot of times part of the course introduction materials. Like at the beginning of this course, Nicole sent out the email, and then there was a whole bunch of other pages along with it. And in there was information and directions about how to actually take an online course and references to the help desk. And it spoke about, what kind of connection you need to have, what kind of computer components. I don't know the technical words for the computer stuff, but like what is necessary for you to have access to be able to take an online course.
So it's a prerequisite
of the objectives.
Right, it's a prereq, and that's a great example of, okay, first of all, you already did a technology assessment, so you're going to say they have to have an internet connection. So that's a prerequisite, right, for the class. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to put it in your objectives. But when you write your task analysis, which we're not going to probably get to today, we might have to schedule another one of these calls. But when you get to your task analysis, that's part of that process, is you start saying, okay, you brainstorm everything that the person needs to know or do or whatever, and then you cross out things, or you circle things, or however you want to do it, and you say, okay, these things are redundant, let's merge them. But these things are actually prerequisites, and whether that's knowledge or access or whatever, but those prerequisites are extremely important to figure out ahead of time, and then put them in a parking lot, and then make sure they go into your course description, course syllabus, whatever it happens to be. So I wouldn't go that granular, because that should have already been something that they should have.
Okay, good to know. I was just curious.
Here's what I always say as well, from a grading perspective and from a real life perspective, it is really hard to think of a condition and sometimes even a criterion for every objective. And so don't make stuff up just because you couldn't think of one. I can differentiate. All right. So just kind of keep that in mind too. We're not every single or enabling objective has to have all three components. So you're not going to get failed because of that. I mean, I don't want you making up things basically just because we said this is the way Maker does it.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, Trish.
Okay, I don't know. I think that's all I got. So I will stop sharing unless you got anything else that you want me to add or go back to.
That's up to the class.
Going once, going twice. Okay.
Big idea, right? So that's your goal analysis step. And that's where where you should start after the readings. And then I will talk again next week to talk about any questions you have about the goal analysis before you get into your task analysis, or questions that you have about your task analysis, because there are different types of task analyses and they all have different, reasons for them. So, and I know that can get confusing, and I know at that point you'll have more questions, but we are kind of at the noon mark or 11 o'clock mark. So with that, I'm going to be quiet and say any remaining questions, comments, or thoughts from you.
This is Nanette Tessier. This was very helpful today. Thank
Great.
you, Trish.
Thanks, Annette. I appreciate that.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, it really, really was. Thanks.
Thanks, you guys.
Cool. Thank you. I really appreciate your help and your instruction today, Trish. That was fun. I'm going to have you as a teaching assistant every semester now.
Yeah, once you guys start paying me.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I'm paying you for this, don't forget.
Oh, no. All right. Well, with that, we're definitely going to stop the recording.